You stare at the clock. 3 p.m., your eyes burn. Your brain feels like it is wrapped in thick, wet cotton. You reach for another cup of coffee, hoping to push through the final hours of your shift. You rub your temples. You scroll through your phone just to feel a spike of dopamine. You assume this afternoon crash is a personal failure, a lack of discipline, a sign that you need to try harder, push harder, grind harder. But the real answer is far stranger. For 300,000 years, your brain was wired to shut down at this exact hour. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack willpower, but because of a single number buried in the Tanzanian dirt and a shadow that vanishes at noon. The 8-hour workday is not a biological baseline. It is a recent industrial accident. You might think humans have always worked from 9 to 5. You have not. The concept of selling 8 continuous hours of your life to an employer only became standard in the early 20th century. Labor unions fought for it. Henry Ford popularized it for his car factories. It was a brilliant innovation for the assembly line. It was designed for repetitive physical labor. It kept workers on the floor just long enough to hit a daily quota without completely collapsing. But your brain did not evolve on an assembly line. It evolved on the savannah, and the savannah operates on a completely different schedule. To see how your body actually wants to work, you have to look at the people still living the way your ancestors did. You have to look at the hunter-gatherers. In the 2010s, evolutionary anthropologist Herman Pontzer spent years living with the Hadza people in northern Tanzania. The Hadza are hunter-gatherers. They do not have clocks, they do not have shifts, they do not have managers telling them to maximize their output. Pontzer tracked their every movement. He measured their energy expenditure with advanced metabolic sensors. What he found shattered the myth of the relentless ancient grind. The Hadza are incredibly active. They walk miles every single day. They dig for tough tubers in the hard earth. They climb tall trees for honey. They are in constant motion, but they do not do it all at once. Their intense activity is broken into short, sharp bursts. They forage in the cool morning light. Then, when the sun peaks and the heat becomes oppressive, they stop. They rest in the shade. They sleep. They socialize. They tell stories. They only go back out when the air cools down in the late afternoon. Their total active work time for survival averages around 4 hours a day. There is your first clue. The single number buried in the dirt. 4. Your ancestors did not work 8 hours. They worked 4. And they spent the rest of the time recovering. You might argue that modern knowledge work is different. You're not digging for tubers in the sun. You're sitting in a climate-controlled office staring at a screen. But your brain does not care about the difference. It only cares about energy. And your brain is an energy hog. It makes up just 2% of your body weight, but it consumes 20% of your daily calories. When you force it to focus for 8 continuous hours, it rebels. This rebellion has a name. Scientists call it the post-lunch dip. Sleep researcher Sarah Mednick at the University of California, Riverside has spent her career studying this exact phenomenon. She found that the mid-afternoon slump is not actually caused by eating a heavy lunch. It is a hardwired circadian rhythm. It is baked into your DNA. Your brain literally drops its alertness in the mid-afternoon. It is a biological mandate. In cultures that listen to this mandate, it is called a siesta. In modern corporate culture, it is called a lack of focus. At noon, the sun is directly overhead. Your shadow vanishes into the dirt. The heat peaks, and your brain, following a 300,000-year-old script, demands that you stop. But you do not stop. You drink the coffee. You fight the dip. And here's the part nobody talks about. You treat the human brain like a car engine. You assume that if you put in 8 hours of fuel, you get 8 hours of distance. If you just keep the pedal down, you will eventually reach the destination. But the brain is not a car. It is an organ, and like our body, it fatigues. When you push past the 4-hour mark of deep, focused cognitive work, you are not actually working. You're just occupying space. You are reading the same sentence 3 times. You're writing emails that do not need to be sent. You are pretending to work. Stanford University economist John Pencavel proved this. He studied the output of munitions factory workers. He looked at how many hours they worked versus how many pieces they actually produced. Pencavel found a hard cliff. Once workers passed 50 hours a week, their productivity dropped off a steep cliff. If they worked 70 hours, it took a massive physical and mental toll. The output of 70 hours was barely higher than 55 hours. The extra hours were not just less productive. They were actively destructive. Errors went up. Accidents went up. The brain simply stopped converting time into results. Yet you sit at your desk until 5 p.m. You wear the exhaustion as a badge of honor. You think the pain means you're doing a good job? There's another layer to this. Your brain does not just need a long rest at the end of the day. It needs micro rests all day long. Decades of sleep research pioneered by Nathaniel Kleitman at the University of Chicago revealed that you do not just have a 24-hour circadian rhythm. You also have a 90-minute ultradian rhythm. Every 90 minutes, your brain cycles through a peak of alertness, followed by a roughly 20-minute trough of fatigue. When you are in the trough, your brain is literally consolidating information and clearing out metabolic waste. But the modern workplace demands continuous, unbroken focus. When you feel that 20-minute dip and reach for your phone instead of closing your eyes, you interrupt the cycle. You force the brain to run on fumes. You accumulate a massive sleep debt that no amount of weekend rest can fix. So what happens when you ignore this biological mandate? The modern workplace demands constant availability. It rewards the person who stays late. It confuses motion with progress. It treats the 8-hour day as a moral virtue rather than an industrial relic, but your biology keeps the score. The burn in your eyes at 3 p.m. is not a flaw in your character. It is a feature of your ancestry. It is your nervous system begging you to return to the baseline it was built for. You cannot quit your job and move to the Tanzanian savannah. You cannot abandon the modern economy. You have bills to pay and deadlines to meet. But you can stop fighting your own biology. You can break your day into bursts. You can work in 90-minute sprints, then step away. You can respect the midday dip instead of trying to medicate it with caffeine. You can accept that your capacity for deep, meaningful work is limited to about 4 hours a day. The rest of the time is not wasted. It is recovery. It is the shadow stretching out across the dirt. So when you stare at the clock at 3 p.m. and feel your mind go blank, do not call it a lack of discipline. You are just remembering the number 4 and waiting for your shadow to stretch across the dirt again.